Hello everyone, my dear viewers. This video explores real-life moments where Americans step into Britain expecting flexibility, explanation, and control, only to face something completely different. A system that doesn't argue, doesn't adjust, and doesn't even acknowledge the need to.
I asked a simple question in a London bookstore. Do you have a newer version of this? The man behind the counter looked at the book, then at me. That is the version. I smiled. Right, but like, updated. He paused. It was written in 1892. Silence. No sarcasm. Just a fact sitting there, completely uninterested in my expectation of revision. In York, I walked into a bakery that looked suspiciously old. Crooked shelves, uneven floors, a ceiling that leaned like it had opinions. I whispered to my friend, "This place is themed, right?" The woman behind the counter heard me. "The building is from 1437. I laughed lightly. "Original structure?" She nodded. "Mostly." I stared at the wall. It wasn't decorative. It was just still here. I ordered a pie. "Is it made fresh?" She said, "This morning." I meant the recipe. She meant the pie. Two different timelines. I sat down and realized something uncomfortable. Back home, authentic is marketing. Here, it's just leftover reality. Nobody needs to convince you. The building does it without trying. And suddenly, my questions felt like I was asking history to justify itself. That's the first fracture. Americans are trained to look for intent, branding, strategy, updates. But in Britain, a lot of things weren't designed to impress you. They just survived. And survival doesn't explain itself. It doesn't optimize. It doesn't adapt for clarity. It just remains. And when you expect a system to respond to your curiosity, but it doesn't, you start realizing the system wasn't built for you. I was on a train to Manchester. Quiet carriage. A man across from me took a phone call. Loud. Confident. American. Yeah, I'm on some silent train thing, but it's fine. Heads turned. No one said anything. Not one word. But something shifted. The air got tighter. He kept talking. Louder, even. Like volume could cancel the rules. It didn't. After a minute, a woman gently slid a card onto his table. It read, "Quiet carriage. No confrontation. No explanation. Just information." He looked at it, then around the room. No anger. No reactions. Just people, continuing. He lowered his voice instantly. Not because he was told to, but because the environment made resistance feel irrelevant. In a small museum in Oxford, I saw a man staring at a chair. "That can't be original," he said. The guide replied, "It's from the 1600s. He laughed. "No way people sat on this." The guide nodded. "They did." He leaned closer. And it just stayed. She blinked once. "Yes." He stepped back slowly, like the chair had just revealed something unsettling. He touched the wood like it might disappear. In the US, this would be behind glass. The guide said nothing. Because here, the value isn't in protecting the object from people, it's in people respecting the object. That distinction doesn't get explained. It gets experienced. And for a second, he wasn't questioning the chair. He was questioning why his version of history always felt newer. There's a pattern forming. It's not that Americans are wrong, it's that they're calibrated differently. In the US, age equals fragility. In Britain, age equals continuity. One protects. The other integrates. So when Americans encounter something old, they assume it's curated. Preserved. Isolated. But here, it's just part of life. which makes it harder to categorize and impossible to control through expectation. I asked a waiter in a pub, "Do you have anything not traditional?" He paused. "What do you mean?" I said, "Like something modern." He looked at the menu. "This is modern." I pointed. "Shepherd's pie." He nodded. "It was made today." I tried again. "No, I mean like new cuisine." He smiled slightly. "Food is food." That was the end of the discussion. I ordered it anyway. It tasted incredible. Not because it was innovative, but because it wasn't trying to be. Back home, menus evolve constantly. Here, they endure. And I realized something mid-bite: innovation isn't always about replacing the past. Sometimes it's about not needing to. And that idea feels strangely uncomfortable when you come from a culture obsessed with constant improvement.
Hey friends, at this point I think nothing could surprise me anymore. I was wrong.
I slipped on wet stone in Edinburgh. Not dramatic, just enough to twist my ankle. A couple nearby looked over. "You all right?" I nodded, trying to stand. It hurt more than I expected. One of them said, "There's a clinic around the corner." I hesitated. "Is it expensive?" They exchanged a glance. "You'll be fine. Just go." Inside, I kept waiting for the moment where someone would mention cost. Registration. Insurance. Something. The nurse just asked, "What happened?" I explained. X-ray. Wrap. Advice. Done. At the desk, I pulled out my card. The woman smiled. "No need." I stood there, frozen. Not relieved. Suspicious. Because in my system, nothing ends without a number. That's where the real conflict hits. Americans don't just expect systems, they expect transactions. Input, output, cost. When that chain breaks, it doesn't feel like generosity. It feels like something's missing. Because the system you grew up in taught you that care is conditional. And when you remove the condition, the brain doesn't relax. It searches for the hidden clause. I was in a queue at a post office in London. Long line. No movement. I checked the clock. 10 minutes. 20. I stepped forward slightly, trying to signal urgency. The man behind me said quietly, "There's a queue." I nodded. "Yeah, I'm just in a bit of a rush." He blinked once. "So is everyone else." No emotion. Just alignment. I looked around, expecting at least one person to support me. Nobody did. Not because they disagreed, but because the system didn't allow exceptions. I stepped back into line. Not defeated. Just absorbed. And that's when I realized, in some places, fairness isn't flexible. It's rigid. And that rigidity doesn't feel cold. It feels final. I asked someone in a cafe, "What time do you close?" He said, 4. I checked my watch. 3:55, can I still order? He looked at the clock. Then at me. We close at 4. I smiled. Right, but it's 5 minutes. He nodded. Yes. Silence. I waited for negotiation. There wasn't one. Time wasn't a suggestion. It was a boundary. Back home, closing time is flexible. Negotiable. A guideline. Here, it felt like a line drawn in concrete. I didn't argue. I just stood there, watching the clock tick toward irrelevance. At 4 o'clock, the lights dimmed slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough. And that was it. No announcement. No apology. Just a system, completing itself without needing my agreement. This is where Americans start to feel something deeper than confusion. It's not just different rules, it's the absence of negotiation. In the US, systems often bend around the individual. In Britain, the individual bends around the system. And that inversion feels subtle at first, until you realize you've stopped trying to change things and started quietly adjusting yourself instead. I overheard a conversation on a bus. An American guy pointing out the window. "You guys should really renovate more. This looks old." The woman next to him didn't even turn her head. "It is old." He laughed. "Yeah, but update it." She finally looked at him. "Why?" He paused. "So it looks better." She blinked once. "It already does." He leaned back, confused. Not offended, just disconnected. Because in his mind, improvement is obvious. Linear. Necessary. But here, improvement isn't always about change. Sometimes it's about preservation. And that idea doesn't get explained. It just sits there, quietly rejecting your assumption that everything should evolve in the direction you're used to. I visited an old church in a small village. Empty. Silent. I whispered, "Is this still used?" A caretaker appeared from nowhere. "Every Sunday." I nodded. "Feels more like a museum." He looked around slowly. "It isn't." The air shifted. Not threatening. Just certain. Like I had misidentified something that didn't need to correct me, it just waited for me to notice.
My dear friends, this last one, I still don't fully understand. Write please your comments.
I asked a police officer in London for directions. Standard. Clear. Helpful. As he spoke, I noticed something missing. No gun. I waited until he finished. "So, where's your firearm?" He smiled politely. "I don't carry one." I blinked. "Ever?" He shook his head. "Not in this role." The sentence didn't feel reassuring. It felt incomplete. "How do you deal with danger?" I asked. He paused. Differently. That was it. No breakdown. No justification. Just a different model of reality that didn't need to defend itself. I walked away more unsettled than before. Not because I felt unsafe, but because I realized safety might not require the same things I've always assumed. On a train to Glasgow, I heard someone say, "I love England." The man next to him turned slowly. "This is Scotland." The American laughed. Same thing. Silence. Not tense. Just sealed. The man nodded once. No. That was the entire correction. No lecture. No argument. Just a boundary placed so cleanly it didn't need reinforcement. The American tried to recover. "I mean, it's all the UK, right?" The man looked out the window. "It is. But it isn't." And somehow, that made perfect sense to everyone except him. Because identity here isn't simplified for convenience. It exists in layers. And those layers don't flatten just because you don't understand them. That's the deeper shift. Americans often simplify to navigate. Brits maintain complexity and expect you to adjust. One reduces friction. The other preserves structure. And when those meet, the person expecting simplification feels lost, not because the system is unclear, but because it refuses to translate itself into something easier. I corrected someone's pronunciation in a shop. "You mean aluminum?" He looked at me. "Aluminium." I smiled. "Yeah, we say it shorter." He nodded. "We say it fully." I laughed, expecting debate. There wasn't one. He just continued scanning items. Not defensive. Not engaged. Just uninterested in optimizing language for my comfort. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about right or wrong. It was about ownership. I assumed my version was standard. He didn't care. Because here, language isn't adjusted to global dominance. It stays rooted. And if you don't align with it, you're not corrected. You're just outside of it. I visited a castle. Real one. Stone. Cold. Silent. I asked the guide, do people ever get used to this? She looked around. To what? I gestured vaguely. All of it. The history. She paused. You don't get used to it. You live with it. Something about that answer stayed longer than the tour itself. Because that's the difference. Americans visit history. Brits coexist with it. It's not a destination, it's a background process. Always running. Always present. And when you step into that environment expecting it to perform for you, it doesn't. It just continues. And you either adapt or feel increasingly out of sync with everything around you. So what are these stories really about? Not ignorance. Not arrogance. Calibration. Americans are calibrated for a world that responds. Britain is a system that doesn't. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It doesn't adjust. And that silence, that lack of reaction, is what makes it powerful. Because without resistance, there's nothing to push against. At some point, you stop trying to fix things. You stop asking why everything isn't more efficient, more modern, more clear. And you start noticing something else. It works. It all works, just not for you specifically. And that's the shift. You're not the main character here. You're just passing through something that was never waiting for you.
My dear friend, did you like these stories? If so, like and write in the comments what topics you'd like to hear the next stories on. Thank you. Bye bye.